The returned sun had just begun to rise over the small town of Vellore. Narrow streets glowed gold with dust and early light. Stray dogs wandered in lazy arcs, and old shopkeepers slowly unlocked their shutters, their fingers worn from years of quiet work. Auto rickshaws coughed awake in the distance. Filling the morning with their tired hung dot, a black car pulled up outside the rusting gates of a local government school. Its arrival disturbed the stillness. The driver stepped out quickly and opened the door. From inside emerged a man wearing simple clothes, beige pants, a white shirt, no tie, no watch. He looked ordinary. No one would have guessed he ran one of the most powerful companies in the world. This was Sundar Pichai. It had been nearly 30 years since he walked through these gates. Back then, he was just another skinny boy with bright eyes, carrying a tiffin box and a head full of quiet questions. Today, he stood still, taking it all in. The same crumbling walls, the same dusty courtyard, the same smell of chalk and soil. But everything also looked smaller, not worse. Just smaller, like time had gently folded the place into something less sharp. He was in India on a short visit. An invitation to speak at a tech event had brought him home. But instead of flying back right after, something in him had wanted to return to this town. Something had pulled him back, not for cameras, not for speeches. Something quieter, something personal. As he walked across the courtyard, the sound of children laughing pulled him toward one of the open classrooms. Rows of kids sat cross-legged on the floor, listening carefully to an older woman at the front. Her voice cracked slightly, but it was warm, patient, and full of rhythm. She wore a faded green sari. Her silver hair was tied back neatly. Her hands moved as she spoke, drawing invisible pictures in the air. Sundar froze in the doorway. Something about her posture, her way of explaining, the kindness in her tone, it was like touching a forgotten dream. He leaned against the doorframe, quietly watching. The woman turned for a moment to write on the blackboard. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the chalk. Sundar's heart skipped. It couldn't be. He stepped closer. The wooden floor creaked beneath him. She turned again, her eyes passing over the children, then stopping on the man standing in the shadows. She squinted. Her face didn't change. No recognition. But Sundar felt something deep and sudden move inside him. After the class ended, he waited by the steps. She came out slowly, leaning a little on the doorway as she adjusted her sari. Her breath was short. The heat of the morning was already heavy. Sundar walked up to her and gently said, "Excuse me, ma'am." She looked up, smiling politely. "Yes, Beta?" He smiled at the word, Beta. It had been years since anyone had called him that. "You used to work in a house on Anna Street," he said, voice soft. "You looked after a boy who always asked too many questions. Do you remember?" Her eyes narrowed. She studied his face. Her mouth opened slightly, and her breath caught. "Sundar?" she said, the word barely a whisper. He nodded, tears rising in his eyes before he could stop them. She reached up and touched his cheek, her hand thin and trembling. She smiled, but it was a tired smile, stretched between surprise and something heavier. "Look at you," she said. "So tall now." They sat on a stone bench under the banyan tree in the schoolyard. She told him her name again, Radha. Mrs. Radha, but he never called her that. Just Radha Amma. She had been more than a nanny. She was the one who had wiped his tears when he failed a math test, the one who snuck extra ghee into his rice, the one who told him bedtime stories about kings who solved problems with kindness. She had stayed behind when the family moved to Chennai, thinking she would join them later. But things changed. Letters got fewer. Time moved on. And then one day they stopped altogether. "I thought you left," she said, "that you forgot." Sundar looked down. He had forgotten. Or maybe he had just buried those memories too deep while trying to chase a life across the world. He felt a sharp guilt that made it hard to breathe. "Why are you still working?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "I like teaching. The money helps too. Pension is small, and children. They make me feel young." But Sundar could see it now. The way she rubbed her knees when she thought he wasn't looking. the way her shoulders sagged. Her sari was old and thin. Her shoes didn't match. Her voice, even when warm, had an edge of tiredness to it. He wanted to do something. Right there. Take her hand. Tell her she would never need to work again. Offer her everything she had once given him. Safety, comfort, peace. But she stood. Suddenly. Come, she said. Let me show you where I eat lunch. Nothing fancy. Just tamarind rice today. He followed her across the courtyard. As they neared the back building, she slowed. Her hand touched the wall for balance. Then, without warning, she stumbled. Her body folded like cloth in the wind. She collapsed hard onto the ground. Sundar shouted, running to her. She was still breathing, but barely. Her eyes fluttered open and shut. The dust on her face made her look older, fragile like dry leaves. Sundar knelt beside her, his heart pounding. The children nearby stopped playing. A teacher screamed. Someone ran for help, and all Sundar could think was, what if he had come a day later? He held her hand, whispering her name again and again, double quotes, Emma ... Stay with me. Please ... stay. The schoolyard had never been so quiet ... and then her eyes closed completely. Asterisk, the silence in the hospital. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. To Sundar, it felt like 70. He sat in the back beside Radha Amma, holding her hand as the siren wailed through the streets of Vellore. The noise cut through him like a blade. It reminded him of the helplessness he hadn't felt in decades. Not during board meetings. Not during tech launches. Not even during failures. This was different. This was personal. Her hand was warm but limp. Her breathing was shallow, like a candle flickering near its end. Inside the hospital, nurses moved quickly. The air smelled of antiseptic and old paint. Sundar followed them into the emergency room, but a nurse gently stopped him at the door. You have to wait here, sir. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but no words came. Instead, he nodded, took a step back, and stood. Alone in the corridor, the hallway was cold. The fan above him squeaked every time it turned. A young boy sat on a plastic chair nearby, holding a bundle of bananas and staring at the floor. A woman sobbed softly in the corner, her scarf covering her face. Sundar sat down slowly. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands shaking. It was strange. All his life he had been trained to stay calm, even under pressure. Especially under pressure. But this wasn't pressure. This was fear. And it was growing inside him, minute by minute. He thought back to the last time. He had seen Radha Amma before today. It was a long time ago. He had been 10. He remembered her packing his school bag, combing his hair, humming an old song under her breath. He remembered asking her to come with them to Chennai. She had smiled and said she would come soon. But she never did. No one told him why ... and then life happened. One thing after another. School, exams, the move to the US, Stanford, marriage, kids, Google, alphabet. Success stacked itself into tall towers. But somewhere in the middle, he had stopped looking back. Now, sitting in that hospital, surrounded by peeling walls and the smell of disinfectant, all of that seemed so far away. Useless even. What good was all his success if he had forgotten the one person who had helped build the foundation of who he was? A doctor came out after what felt like an hour. His expression was calm, but serious. Are you family? He asked. Sundar paused. It was a simple question, but it struck him hard. She used to take care of me when I was a boy, he said slowly. The doctor nodded. She had a mild stroke. Not major, but we need to keep her under observation. She's stable for now. Do you know if she has any relatives? Sundar shook his head. I don't know. I don't think so. The doctor scribbled something on a clipboard. We'll need someone to sign the admission papers. And to stay with her, in case she wakes up confused. I'll stay, Sundar said quickly. The doctor gave a small nod. Room 112. She'll be moved there shortly. As the doctor walked away, Sundar leaned back against the wall. The weight in his chest had shifted slightly. Still heavy, but now mixed with something else. Responsibility, a quiet sense of duty, and guilt. In room 112, the light was dim. The ceiling fan spun slowly. Rada Amma lay on a thin bed, her head bandaged, an oxygen tube in her nose. Machines beeped softly beside her, tracking her breath, her heartbeat. She looked small, smaller than he remembered. Her arms were thin, her skin pale, but her face still held that same peaceful shape, like someone who had spent a life giving more than taking. Sundar pulled up a plastic chair and sat by her side. He took her hand gently and held it in both of his. Amma, he whispered, you don't know what you meant to me. He looked at her face, hoping for a flicker, a sign that she heard him. Asterisk, when I was scared, you made me brave. When I was lonely, you sat with me. When I cried, you held me without asking why. His voice broke. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. I should have found you sooner. Hours passed. Nurses came in and out. Someone brought tea. Sundar didn't drink it. He just sat there, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall. The hospital began to quiet down. Night came. The noises outside faded. Asterisk. At midnight, a nurse came in to check the monitors. Sundar looked up. Double quotes. Do you know anything about her family? He asked again. The nurse shook her head. Not much. Most people here just call her Amma. She teaches part-time at the school. Says she doesn't want to stay at home doing nothing. Where does she live? A small house near the old railway station. She walks to school every day. Alone? The nurse nodded. She's very proud, never asks for help. After the nurse left, Sundar leaned back and stared at the ceiling. His thoughts ran in quiet circles. He wondered how many times she had walked those dusty roads in the heat. How many nights she had eaten alone. How many times she had fallen sick and had no one to call, and he had been just a phone call away. He felt a weight settle in his chest, deeper than guilt. It was grief, not just for what had happened, but for all the years lost in between. Years filled with silence. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He hesitated, then opened the camera app. He took a photo of her hand in not to share, not for social media, just to remember. To never forget again. Just then, her fingers moved. He looked up. Her eyes fluttered open slightly. She looked around, confused. Then she saw him. Sundar, she said, her voice dry. He stood quickly, leaned in close. I'm here, Amma. You're safe. Her lips trembled. You stayed. Of course I did. A small tear slipped from her eye. You came back, she whispered. He nodded, holding her hand tighter. I did. Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost too soft to hear. There's something you need to know. About your father. Sundar's heart skipped. What? He asked, leaning closer, but she was already drifting back into sleep. The machines beeped steadily. Her hand relaxed again in his. And Sundar sat there, still, frozen by the words she had spoken. Something about his father. He hadn't thought about his father in years. A quiet man. Distant. Strict. Always busy. He had never spoken much about the past. What could Radha Amma know? The hospital room grew quiet again. But inside Sundar, a storm had begun to rise. Asterisk. The old house near the railway tracks. Morning light crept slowly into the hospital room. It painted soft golden lines across the tiled floor, touched the edge of the bed, and brushed lightly against the thin folds of Rhoda Ma's blanket. Outside, the town was waking up. Distant horns. Birds calling from rooftops. The first shouts of shopkeepers pulling open shutters. Sundar hadn't slept. He had sat by her side all night. Watching her breathe, listening to the machines keep time. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had whispered before falling back asleep. There's something you need to know. About your father. The words repeated in his mind like a quiet knock behind a closed door. Gentle, but persistent. His father had always been a quiet man. Kind in his own way, but distant. He rarely smiled. He read the newspaper carefully every morning, word by word. He spoke little, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of caution. Sundar had always assumed he was just a private person, a man who worked hard and expected the same from his children. There was respect between them, but not closeness. But now, sitting in a hospital room thousands of miles from the world he had built for himself, Sundar realized something he had never fully admitted before. He didn't really know who his father had been, not as a young man, not before marriage, not before Sundar was born. Radha Amma stirred slightly. Sundar leaned forward, her eyes opened slowly, more aware this time, though still tired. She looked around and focused on his face. "You're still here," she said softly. He smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." She reached for a sip of water, and he helped her, holding the cup steady. Her hands trembled, but there was strength in her eyes. "Do you remember what you said last night?" he asked gently. She blinked. "I said many things. You said there was something I needed to know? About my father." Her face changed, just slightly. A flicker of hesitation. A shadow passed through her eyes, as if something old had been pulled up from the depths. She looked away, toward the window. "Some things are better left where they belong," she whispered. "Please," he said. "I want to know." She was silent for a long moment. Then she turned back to him. "Your father was not always the man you knew before you were born. Before he married your mother, he made a mistake, a serious one." Sundar felt his chest tighten. "What kind of mistake?" "He fell in love, but not with your mother. With someone else. A young woman from a poor family. He promised her things. A future, a home. But then ... he left. He was pressured by his own father. Family didn't approve." She paused. Her voice grew slower. "The girl, she was heartbroken. Her name was Nalini. She worked in the school. She was bright, kind, and she was carrying his child." Sundar stared at her, his mouth slightly open. "She had a child?" "Yes," said Radha. A boy." Sundar felt the walls of the room blur slightly. A noise, like a ringing in his ears, filled the silence. He looked at her, searching her face for any sign that this was not real, not true. A mistake, a dream. What happened to them? He asked, his voice hoarse. "She raised the child alone. She never asked for anything, never told anyone who the father was. She died young. The boy grew up poor. He lives in this town. Do you know his name?" Radha Amma nodded slowly. "His name is Anand." The name felt like thunder in Sundar's ears. All his life, he had been the only child. Or so he believed. And now, sitting in a quiet hospital room in Vellore, he was being told that he had a half-brother. A man who had grown up in the same town, the same streets, possibly even the same school. And he had never known. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Sundar asked, his voice shaking. "Because your father never told anyone, not even your mother. Only I knew. I found out by accident, and I kept quiet because it wasn't my place, but now I think it's time." Sundar stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out. The hospital grounds were quiet. Trees swayed in the breeze. An old man swept the pathway below with slow, steady strokes. Sundar felt a knot form in his chest, not just of shock, but of shame. If what she said was true, then somewhere out there, in this town, lived a man who shared his blood. A man who had grown up without a father. Without the chances Sundar had, and he had no idea. "Where can I find him?" he asked, turning back to her dot. She pointed weakly toward the east. "Near the railway tracks, a small house made of blue brick. He fixes radios and old TVs. He's good with his hands." Sundar nodded. "I'm going to find him." Radha Amma touched his arm. "Go gently. He doesn't know who you are, or where you come from. His life has been hard." Sundar squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me." He left the hospital, not in a black car, but on foot. The streets of Vellore felt different now. Each corner, each alley, each face, they all seemed filled with secrets he hadn't noticed before. He walked past chai stalls, past vegetable carts, past boys playing cricket with broken bats. Eventually, the town gave way to silence. The buildings grew older. The roads became rougher. He followed the sound of trains, distant and rhythmic, until he reached the tracks. Beyond them stood a cluster of small homes, most of them patched with tin roofs and faded paint. And then he saw it, a house made of blue brick, tiny, slanted, worn by time, but neat. 2 potted plants sat at the entrance. A wooden bench leaned against the wall. Sundar approached slowly. He knocked once. Twice. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark skin, lean, strong hands covered in grease. His eyes were sharp, watchful, cautious. Yes? He asked. Sundar felt his voice catch. He didn't know what to say. Double quotes. I heard you fix old electronics, he said. Finally, the man nodded. I do. Sundar stepped forward. My name is Sundar. The man looked at him carefully, then nodded. Anand. They shook hands, and in that quiet moment, 2 worlds touched. Without knowing the truth between them. Not yet. But it was coming. The weight of silence in Anand's workshop was a small, dim room tucked behind his house, just a few steps from the railway tracks. The air inside smelled of solder, dust, and old wires. Radios with broken antennas lay on wooden shelves beside cracked television sets and tangled coils of copper. In the far corner, a dusty fan turned slowly, its blades groaning as if tired from years of work. Anand pulled up 2 stools, wiping one off with a cloth before gesturing to Sundar. Sit. It's hot outside. Sundar sat down, still unsure of what he was doing here. He had planned to just see the house, maybe catch a glimpse of the man. He had not expected to be invited in, and he certainly hadn't expected the warmth in Anand's voice. What brings you to this side of town? Anand asked, reaching for a half-repaired radio on the table. His fingers moved with skill and ease, opening the casing like a puzzle. He'd solved 100 times. Double quotes, just ... Visiting, Sundar replied slowly. I grew up not far from here. Came back after a long time. Anand nodded. People don't usually come back. They move to big cities. Forget these streets. His words weren't bitter, just honest. And they hit Sundar harder than he expected. Do you ever think about leaving? Sundar asked. Anand laughed, a quiet laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Where would I go? Vellore is all I've known. This workshop feeds me. These hands? He held them up, stained with grease, fingers slightly calloused. They know this work, not much else. There was no shame in his voice, only reality. An acceptance of life as it was. Sundar watched him solder 2 wires together, the tiny spark reminding him of something from his own childhood. His father had once opened a broken radio at home. Sundar had watched him, curious. But his father hadn't said much, just worked silently, like always. Now, watching Anand, it felt like seeing a version of that moment again, only different, gentler, less distant. Do you live alone? Sundar asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Anand nodded. No family. Never married. Too busy fixing other people's problems to start my own, I guess. Sundar felt something twist inside him. The silence between them grew heavy. He wanted to speak, to tell him. But how do you look into someone's eyes and say, we share the same father. You grew up with nothing. And I had everything. We should have been brothers, but the world chose differently. Instead. He just sat there, watching Anand work. Anand finished fixing the radio, turned it on, and a burst of old Tamil music filled the room. The sound was warm, crackling, full of life. He smiled. Still works. They built these well in the old days. Sundar smiled too, but his thoughts were far away. Radha Amma's voice echoed in his head. His life has been hard. Go gently. You're good at what you do, Sundar said. Anand shrugged. It's simple work, not fancy, but I like bringing dead things back to life. People throw things away too easily. Sundar looked around. There were dozens of broken items in the room, all waiting for someone to care enough to fix them. Radios, clocks, tape recorders. Each one told a story of being useful, then being abandoned. And now they had found their way to this small room where a quiet man gave them another chance. A long silence passed. Outside, a train rumbled by, shaking the window panes slightly. Finally, Anand stood up. You hungry? He asked. I was about to make some tea, and maybe Maji. Sundar hesitated. Then nodded Dot in the tiny kitchen. Anand boiled water on a single gas burner. He moved with ease, humming softly. The smell of tea leaves and ginger filled the air. He tossed in some instant noodles, added salt, then split the meal into 2 steel plates. They sat on the floor, eating with their hands. The food was simple, spicy, comforting. Sundar hadn't eaten like this in years, not since his childhood. The taste brought back memories he hadn't visited in decades. Lunches with friends on the school steps. Radha Amma's cooking. His mother calling him in before sunset. He looked across at Anand, a man who should have been part of all those memories, but instead had lived a completely different life, just streets away. Can I ask you something? Sundar said quietly. Anand nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. Do you ever wonder about your past? Your parents? Anand's face changed. Just slightly. The calmness in his eyes darkened. Why? I'm just curious. Anand sat back, sighing. I don't remember my mother well. She died when I was a kid. People said she was kind, quiet. She worked at a school. Always tired, always smiling. Never talked much about where I came from. And your father? Anand gave a short laugh, more bitter this time. Never knew him. Never even saw a photo. She never said his name. Just told me he was someone. Who left? Did you ever want to find him? And looked away toward the door. Every child wants to know where they come from. But after a while, he stopped asking. Because the answers don't change anything. They just open old wounds. Sundar felt the words like a blow. He looked down at his empty plate, his throat dry. If you had the chance, to meet him. What would you say? Anand was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe I'd ask why. Maybe I'd just walk away. Depends on the day. Sundar nodded, but the silence between them was now louder than before. He felt something breaking inside him, a wall, maybe. A belief that he could keep this secret. Protect both of them from the pain, but the pain was already here. It had always been here. He stood up slowly. Thank you for the tea. And the food. Anand smiled. Anytime. You're welcome here? Sundar hesitated, then pulled out a small card from his wallet and handed it to him. This has my number. If you ever want to talk, just need something. Anand looked at the card, puzzled. You live in Vellore? Not really. I'm just visiting, but I'll be around a little longer. Anand nodded, took the card, placed it gently on a shelf. Sundar stepped outside. The sky was beginning to darken. Clouds gathered low, heavy with rain. The air smelled of dust and water. He turned one last. Time to look at the blue house. A stranger had welcomed him, fed him, shared stories with him without knowing they were family. And Sundar had walked in wearing silence like armor. He started walking back toward town, his heart heavier than it had been when he arrived. Some truths are like storms. They don't wait forever. And he knew this storm was coming soon. Truth between brothers' rain fell hard that night. It wasn't gentle. It came like a storm that had been waiting too long, drenching the streets of Vellore in sheets of silver. Thunder cracked above the rooftops, and lightning lit up the narrow lanes like flashes of memory. The air smelled of wet earth and something deeper, something like grief, or maybe cleansing. Inside the hospital room, Sundar sat beside Radha Amma again. Her breathing was steadier now. Her cheeks had regained some color. A nurse had brushed her hair gently, and a warm blanket was tucked around her shoulders. But her eyes were far away, looking out through the window as the rain traced thin rivers down the glass. I saw him, Sundar said softly. She turned her head, slowly. Anand? He nodded. He let me in. He gave me tea. He doesn't know who I am. Radha Amma closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, full of quiet pain. He's a good boy, she said. Always was, never angry. Not even when the world was unfair. Sundar leaned back in the chair. He felt tired in a way he couldn't explain, not just in his body, but deep in his bones. Like carrying a story that didn't belong to him, a story passed down through silence, buried under years of comfort. And forgetting. I wanted to tell him, he said. But I couldn't. Why? She asked double quotes because ... How do you tell someone that the father who abandoned them raised someone else? Gave him everything. Love, education, opportunity, the world? His voice cracked. How do you say that and not break him all over again? Radha Amma looked at him for a long time. Then she said something Sundar hadn't expected. Maybe he's already broken. Maybe he just never let it show. That sentence sat between them like a stone. Sundar stared at the floor. Water dripped outside the window. In the hallway, a baby cried softly. He reminds me of my father, Sundar said. His eyes, the way he moves, the quiet way he listens. It's like looking into the past. Radha Amma nodded. Blood remembers. Even when people forget. After a long silence, Sundar stood up. He walked to the window. The rain had slowed, but the sky was still heavy. He thought about Anand's small blue house, his strong hands, the radios that came in broken and left working. He thought about the way Anand had smiled, not because life had been kind, but because he had learned to survive without kindness. I'm going to tell him, Sundar said finally. Radha Amma didn't respond right away. Then she said, tell him with your heart, not your guilt. He nodded. The next morning, Sundar returned to the blue house. The sky was clear now. Birds called from trees. Puddles reflected bits of sky. Children played in the distance, their laughter bouncing off the walls. Anand was outside, fixing a table, fan with a missing blade. He looked up as Sundar approached and smiled. You again. Hope it's okay, Sundar said. Of course. Sit, this one's been tricky. They worked side by side for a few minutes. Sundar passed him tools. Anand explained how certain gears worked, how a motor could die from gust, how sometimes all a machine needed was patience. Sundar listened carefully. And then, when the moment felt still, he said it. Double quotes Anand. I came here for a reason. Anand paused, holding a screwdriver in midair. What do you mean? Sundar took a deep breath. His hands were cold. I didn't just visit Vellore to see the school. I came because of you. Anand looked confused. You don't know me. I didn't, but someone told me something. Something about our past. Something about our father. And froze. The fan between them kept spinning slowly, as if unaware that something enormous had entered the space between two men. Your mother. Sundar continued, voice shaking. She had a son. With a man who left. A man who promised her a life, then disappeared. That man was my father. Anand stared at him. No words. No movement. Sundar's voice dropped to a whisper. That means you and I were brothers. The silence that followed was like no other. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of years lost. Full of things unsaid. Full of rain and heat and childhoods that never touched. Anand stood up slowly. He didn't speak. He walked to the edge of the yard. Sundar stayed seated, heart pounding, unsure if he should follow or leave. Finally, Anand spoke. His back still turned. Asterisk. You're sure? Yes, Radha Amma told me. She knew. Anand nodded slowly. Then looked up at the sky. All my life, he said. I used to imagine who he might have been. What kind of man leaves a child? I thought maybe he was dead. Or poor. Or sick. But he was alive. Just living someone else's life. He turned around and that someone was you. Sundar stood now too. I didn't know, not until yesterday. Anand's eyes were not angry. Not cold. They were just tired. Asterisk. You didn't know, he repeated. But you still had everything. A family. A future. I had ... this. He gestured around him, the workshop, the cracked walls, the tools. But I made peace with it. I stopped expecting answers. Sundar stepped closer. I can't undo the past. I can't fix what happened, but I can choose what comes next. Anand looked at him. For a moment, something moved behind his eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet, but curiosity. Something softer. Why now? He asked. Because you're my brother, and you deserve to know. And because if I walk away again, then I become him. I become the man who left you behind. The words hung in the air. Then Anand said, What do you want from me? Nothing, Sundar said. Just ... A chance to know you. And for you to know that you were never forgotten. Just lost in a silence that should have never been there. And then looked down. Then, slowly, he walked over and picked up the screwdriver again. This fan still needs fixing. Sundar smiled. Show me how. And side by side, without speaking further, they worked. Not as strangers. Not yet as brothers. But as two men who had found the first crack in the wall that had kept them apart their entire lives. The truth had been spoken. Now, what came next? That was a choice only they could make. Asterisk the home we build. Following days unfolded slowly. Like pages turning in a book that neither of them had finished reading, Sundar returned to the blue house each morning. No grand gestures, no talk of the past unless Anand brought it up. They worked together on radios, ate simple meals, and sat on the doorstep as trains passed by like echoes of lives moving somewhere far. There was no script to what they were building. No perfect lines, just presence. And sometimes presence is the most powerful offering. Radha Amma remained in the hospital for a few more days. She was improving, eating better, speaking more, but she tired quickly. When Sundar visited, she smiled more now. Not because everything had been fixed, but because something had been faced. Secrets had been carried too long. And now they were in the open, letting light in where there had once only been silence. How is he? She asked one afternoon. Quiet, Sundar said. But curious. That's a beginning, Sundar nodded. He doesn't say much. But he listens, and he teaches me things without realizing it. Radha Amma smiled gently. You're more alike than you know. He looked at her then, a woman worn by life, softened by time, and still full of quiet power. She had held on to a truth that wasn't hers to carry, and now, with her body growing weak, she had chosen to release it. She had opened a door neither of them could have found without her. I want to do something for him, Sundar said. Something. Real. She raised an eyebrow. Not out of guilt, I hope. No, he said firmly. Out of love. Out of the knowledge that I was given something, and now it's time to give something back. That evening, Sundar didn't return to the hotel. He walked the streets of Vellore instead, past the old school, past his childhood home. He paused by a small bookstore, then a temple, then an old banyan tree where he had once scraped his knee. As a boy, everything looked smaller now, but heavier with meaning. He thought of all the choices that had shaped his life, and the one choice his father had made that shaped Anand's. But fate was not final. Sundar believed that now. The next day, he found Anand bent over a tape recorder from the 80s, trying to get it to stop eating cassettes. Sundar sat beside him and waited. After a while, he spoke. I have something to ask you. Anand didn't look up, but his fingers paused slightly. I want you to come with me. Not to leave this place. Just to visit something. Something important. Anand looked at him now, eyes steady. Where? You'll see. They took Sundar's car. The first time Anand had ever sat in a vehicle with leather seats and cold air blowing from hidden vents. He didn't speak much on the drive. The roads turned from narrow lanes to wider ones, then back to quiet again. Finally, they stopped in front of a large 2-story building, still under construction. Scaffolding lined one side, and workers were painting a sign above the door. Anand stepped out, confused. What is this? Sundar didn't answer at first. He led Anand to the front gate, where a tall man in glasses nodded and opened the latch. Inside was a wide-open hall filled with desks, computers, tools, wiring kits, shelves of books, screens, a row of chairs along the side for children to sit and wait their turn. On the far wall, in bold black letters, was a plaque. The Pichai Center for Youth Innovation, Velour Chapter, stood frozen. What? Is this? He repeated, softer now. It's a community tech lab, Sundar said. Free for kids, especially those who can't afford private education. They can come here, learn to build things, fix things, dream, and then turn slowly to him. Why name it after me? Because I built it. But it was your hands that taught me how to fix something without replacing it. And because I want this place to be rooted in real stories, in people who stayed, not just people who left, and then stared at the floor, then at the machines, then at the plaque. This is too much, he whispered. No, Sundar said. This is just the beginning. Silence again. But this time it was warm. Shared. Then Sundar added, I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness. Not family. But if you're willing, I'd like to come here with you. Build things. Teach. Together. And then didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to one of the tables, picked up a screwdriver, and held it in his hand. Turned it slowly, felt the weight of it. Then he looked at Sundar and nodded. We'll need better wire cutters, he said. Sundar smiled. 2 days later, Radha Amma was discharged from the hospital. Sundar brought her to the center on her first day out. She stepped through the front doors with slow, careful steps. When she saw the plaque, she stopped. Her hands trembled slightly. You named it after him? Yes, Sundar said. She reached out and touched the lettering on the wall. He deserves it. So do you, Sundar said. Handing her a second plaque, she read the words slowly. In honor of Radha Amma, for the love that never asked to be seen, but changed everything. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't speak. She just placed her hand over her heart and nodded. That evening, they all sat together for the first time. Sundar, Anand, and Radha Amma around a small wooden table just outside the center. 3 cups of tea. 3 lives once broken apart, now gently stitching themselves back together. No apologies. Just the quiet sound of healing. Sometimes family is not what we're given. It's what we choose to build moment by moment, act by act, truth by truth. And that night, under the soft glow of lanterns, with the smell of rain still in the air, Sundar knew that for the first time in a long, long while, he was home. Asterisk.